Darkness covered the edge of known space where the colony of Erebus 7 orbited a quiet blue world. It was a peaceful place where young minds trained to become the next explorers of humanity. The colony was full of laughter, bright classrooms, and voices of children dreaming of the stars. Then one night the laughter ended. A small distress signal reached Earth's Deep Space Command. It lasted only a few seconds before vanishing into static. "They're here!" saved the children. The signal was weak but filled with terror. Communication officers tried to trace it, but the entire colony had gone silent. No radar echo, no thermal trail, no escape pods. Erebus 7 was gone as if erased from existence. Admiral Kepler stood inside the Terran Defense Center, staring at the signal recording over and over again. Around him, officers whispered. Some said it was a pirate attack. Others believed it was something far worse. When Kepler saw the spectral readings from the wreckage drifting near the colony's last position, he knew this was no accident. The radiation patterns were alien, Xylar technology, the same empire that once mocked humans at the Galactic Council, calling them infant species. Earth sent a request for investigation, but the Council delayed the response. The alien delegates smiled too easily, their words polished and cold. "There is no evidence linking any known race to this event," they said. Kepler's jaw tightened. He had seen this play before. Political games hiding darker truths. "They're protecting someone," he muttered. That night, in the quiet of his quarters, he replayed old memories. His own daughter had once studied at Erebus 7. She had wanted to build ships that could reach galaxies beyond the rim. He stared at her photograph until dawn. When the sun rose, so did his decision. Humanity would not wait for permission to act. On Mars, the great shipyards came alive. Engines that had slept for decades roared back to life. Thousands of engineers worked in silence, refitting dreadnoughts and cruisers under a single unspoken command. Soldiers painted a new mark on their armor, a child's handprint glowing faintly under the lights. It wasn't a symbol of war, it was a promise. Meanwhile, across the alien systems, whispers began. Some claimed the humans were gathering fleets. Others laughed and called it a bluff. "They are emotional creatures," one Xylar captain said. "They bark, but they do not bite." His words would be the last message received from his ship. On the third week after the colony's fall, strange disappearances began near Xylar borders. Merchant vessels found empty regions where patrol ships used to be. Space traffic logs showed unknown signatures moving in formation, silent and fast. Some believed it was pirates. Others started to fear the truth: the humans were coming. Inside the Terran flagship Vigilant, Kepler watched the fleet status display. Rows of green lights stretched across the holographic map, each representing a warship ready for launch. "Are we ready?" he asked. Captain Mira, standing beside him, nodded. "All systems green, sir. The fleet is waiting for your word." Kepler looked out the massive viewport. Earth glowed far below, peaceful and unaware of the storm about to rise in its name. "For Erebus 7, he said softly. The command echoed across every ship in the fleet. Engines flared, and the void filled with the low rumble of thousands of human warships awakening. In the darkness of interstellar space, the first Terran fleet vanished from all known routes. No one knew where they were headed, but alien scanners started picking up ghost signals moving silently toward Xylar territory. Panic spread in alien capitals. The Council called for calm, but their words could not hide the fear. Everyone remembered humanity's strange history, how they never started wars but always ended them completely. 2 days later, a surveillance probe near Xylar space captured something impossible. Dozens of massive shapes emerging from the shadows. Human ships, black and silver, reflecting no light. They moved in complete silence, weapons cold but ready. The probe tried to send data, but a brief message was transmitted before it was destroyed. "They're here." The Xylar Dominion scrambled its defenses. Their admirals dismissed the threat, claiming humans lacked the power to fight an empire that had ruled for centuries. Yet their confidence cracked when an entire patrol fleet vanished without a trace. Only fragments of hull were found, burned and twisted, floating through the void. In the Terran fleet, Kepler stood before his crew. "We are not conquerors," he said. "We are not monsters. But they took our children, and we will bring them home. No one touches Earth's future and lives." The crew answered with silence. Cold, heavy silence filled with purpose. The attack began at the border world of Luther Prime. The Xylar outpost detected energy spikes seconds before their sensors went blind. The human dreadnought Vigilant descended from hyperspace like a thunderclap, its cannons blazing white fire. The alien station disintegrated before any distress call could leave orbit. From there, humanity advanced deeper into enemy space, leaving nothing but silence behind. Reports reached the Galactic Council within hours. Alien leaders argued, panicking, searching for someone to blame. "We told them to wait," said one. "You told them to ignore," replied another. But the truth no one dared speak aloud was simple. Humanity was beyond diplomacy now. Back on Earth, news spread quietly. No grand announcements, no victory speeches. Just a single transmission broadcast across every colony. Admiral Kepler's message to all humans: "We are taking back our children." In the quiet corridors of a distant Xylar prison ship, a small human child looked up at the stars through a barred window. She saw distant flashes of light, tiny explosions in the dark. She didn't know what they meant, but she smiled. Somewhere she felt it deep inside her heart. Humanity was coming. And as the alien guards shouted orders and alarms blared through the halls far beyond that cold prison, the Terran fleet prepared its final jump. Engines glowed like rising suns. One command echoed through every ship in the formation: "For the children." Then the stars themselves seemed to tremble, as humanity, silent, furious, unstoppable, entered the war it never wanted but would never lose. The galaxy trembled as news spread across every known system. The humans had struck first. The Xylar Dominion called it an act of madness. The Galactic Council called it revenge. But for humanity, it was justice. The first attack had been swift and precise, no warnings, no demands, no mercy. The world of Luther Prime was gone, erased from the stars. And still, no one had seen the full strength of the Terran Armada. Deep in the command deck of the Vigilant, Admiral Kepler watched streams of data flooding in from the front lines. Reports of destroyed outposts, surrendered alien patrols, and ghost signals that sent chills through even hardened officers. Every time a human fleet appeared, communications vanished, power grids failed, and silence followed. The Terran ships moved like hunters, unseen until it was too late. "Sir," Captain Mira said softly, "Council is requesting contact again." Kepler didn't move. His eyes were fixed on a single hologram flickering before him, the image of a small containment cell, faint shapes inside. Human children, scared, weak, but alive. The signal had been intercepted from Xylar channels. It wasn't just evidence. It was the last piece of humanity's restraint being torn away. "Patch them through," he said. The image of the Galactic Council appeared, alien faces filled with fear disguised as diplomacy. The elder of the Xylar spoke first, his voice shaking. "Admiral Kepler, your forces have violated interstellar law. You are destabilizing the galaxy." Kepler's reply was calm, cold as space itself. "You destabilized it when you stole our children." The alien's expression faltered. "You don't understand. I understand enough," Kepler interrupted. "And if one more child dies, I will burn your empire until nothing remains but dust." The connection ended in silence. Across the Terran fleet, the soldiers felt the shift. There was no going back now. Meanwhile, on a Xylar ship orbiting the prison moon, panic grew. The alien commander, Velar, paced in his quarters. He had been the one to authorize the experiment, capturing human children to study their unique neural patterns. "They were meant to be safe," he muttered to himself. "We were supposed to learn, not provoke." But deep down he knew the truth. The Xylar had underestimated the species they called primitive. They thought humans would plead. Instead, they had brought war to their doorstep. Hours later, Velar's sensors picked up a faint distortion in the void. He froze. Every Xylar officer knew what that meant. Humans were near. They used technology that hid their ships in the shadows of space, cloaked by gravity itself. Alarms blared. "Ray shields, prepare all weapons," he shouted. But it was already too late. The blackness outside shimmered, and dozens of human warships appeared surrounding the moon like silent predators. On the Vigilant, Kepler gave the order. "No negotiations. Target their command grid. Disable, not destroy. We need the children alive." The first volley hit the Xylar defenses before they could fire a single shot. Explosions rippled through orbit. Alien fighters scrambled, but their systems malfunctioned. Jamming signals cut them off from command. Human Marines deployed in drop pods, their descent trails glowing like comets. The Xylar moon trembled as Terran troops landed on its surface. Inside the moon's fortress, the aliens tried to retreat deeper underground. Velar watched the monitors, his mouth dry. Human soldiers were advancing faster than any enemy he had ever seen. They didn't roar or shout. They moved like machines with human hearts, quiet, deadly, unstoppable. One Xylar guard panicked and opened fire at a shadow in the corridor. The return shot was silent and precise. The guard fell before he even hit the ground. In the command center, Velar made a desperate call. "This is Commander Velar. I surrender. Don't fire. The children are unharmed." His voice trembled. A moment later, the doors burst open. Human Marines entered, weapons raised. Their armor bore the glowing handprint symbol, bright against the dark walls. Kepler himself stepped inside, his expression unreadable. Velar dropped to his knees. "Please, we meant no harm. It was science." "We didn't know." Kepler walked toward him slowly. "You took them from their families. You used them as test subjects." His voice was quiet but heavy, each word cutting deeper than any weapon. "You knew." He turned to his soldiers. "Locate every child. Secure the labs. No mercy for resistance." The soldiers spread through the facility. When they reached the containment wing, they found rows of transparent pods. Inside, the children stirred weakly as the pods unlocked. One little girl opened her eyes, whispering, "Are you from Earth?" A Marine removed his helmet and smiled faintly. "Yes, little one. We're taking you home." The signal of the rescue spread across the fleet, and for the first time since the war began, humanity allowed itself to breathe. But Kepler wasn't done. "Transmit message to all council frequencies," he ordered. "They need to see what happens when you touch what's ours." Within hours, a broadcast played across the galaxy. Footage of the children being freed, of human soldiers lifting them gently, of the Xylar base burning in the background. Every species watched in silence. The humans didn't gloat. They didn't smile. They simply stared into the camera as if addressing every world beyond the stars. Kepler's voice carried through the transmission. "We are not invaders. We are not conquerors, but harm a single human child again and you will know what fear truly is." The signal ended. Across the galaxy, no one spoke. Fleets stood down. Armies hesitated. Even the most powerful empires began to whisper that the humans were not just a young race anymore. They were something far older, something the stars themselves had learned to fear. And as the Terran fleet turned for home, silent and victorious, one thing became clear: humanity's fury had only begun. The galaxy held its breath. The destruction of the Xylar prison moon had spread across every star system like a legend in the making. The once arrogant empires now spoke the name human with caution. The Galactic Council called an emergency session, their grand hall filled with panic and trembling voices. But the humans didn't come to attend. They didn't need to. Their actions spoke louder than any speech ever could. In the orbit of Mars, the Terran fleet hung silent, repairing, rearming, and waiting. The rescued children had been brought home, but their condition was dire. Many were weak. Some couldn't even remember their names, and a few hadn't survived the alien experiments. When Admiral Kepler visited the medical bay, the sound of soft beeping filled the air. A small boy, no older than 10, looked up at him and asked in a faint voice, "Did we win?" Kepler didn't answer right away. He placed his hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "We're not done yet," he said. Word of the survivors reached Earth within hours. Billions watched their faces on screens, tears in their eyes and fury in their hearts. Across colonies and stations, people volunteered to join the Terran Defense Force. Factories doubled production, and shipyards built vessels faster than ever before. Humanity wasn't just angry. It was united in a way the galaxy had never seen. The message was clear. No more tolerance, no more patience. But Admiral Kepler knew this wasn't over. The Xylar Dominion might have lost one world, but their pride was wounded deeper than any wound humans could inflict. They would strike back, and when they did, Kepler planned to be ready. In the cold distance of the Delta Sector, the Xylar High Command gathered on their homeworld. Flames from riots lit up the cities below as angry citizens demanded answers. The Grand Marshal slammed his claws against the table. "They humiliated us before the entire galaxy," he shouted. "Do you expect us to do nothing?" An advisor spoke timidly. "Our fleets are in ruins, Marshal. Humanity has technology we don't understand. Their ships bend light. Their weapons tear through shields like paper." The Marshal's eyes burned. "Then we adapt. Gather the remaining fleets. Use every weapon, every experiment. If they want a war of extinction, they will have one." Unseen by the aliens, human intelligence had already infiltrated their systems. The Terran Cyber Division listened to every word, recording every plan. When Kepler received the data, he knew what was coming. "They're preparing retaliation," said Captain Mira, handing him the report. Kepler nodded slowly. "Good, let them come. The lesson isn't finished yet." That night, aboard the Vigilant, the crew stood in formation as Kepler addressed them. "They believe we seek revenge," he said, his voice echoing across the decks. "They're wrong. We seek safety, for our children, for our world, for our species. But to have peace, we must make them understand what happens when peace is broken." The soldiers stood silent, but their determination filled the room like fire. The order was given. Operation Phoenix began. Weeks later, Xylar fleets advanced into the neutral zone, expecting scattered human defense lines. What they found instead was an empty void. No beacons, no transmissions, nothing. Then suddenly every sensor lit up at once. Hundreds of Terran ships emerged from behind moons and asteroids, surrounding the alien armada like wolves closing on their prey. "Contact! Multiple human fleets, Sector 5, 7, and 10, an alien officer screamed. "They've trapped us." The Xylar commander tried to retreat, but hyperspace routes flickered offline, jammed by human interference. Then the darkness exploded in white fire. Human dreadnoughts unleashed plasma barrages, and fighter wings swept through enemy ranks like storm winds. The aliens fought desperately, but their weapons barely scratched Terran hulls. In the chaos, Kepler's voice came through fleet comms. "Remember Erebus 7, remember why we fight." The battle raged for hours, but humanity never faltered. When the smoke cleared, not a single Xylar ship remained intact. It was no longer a battle. It was a message carved into the void. After the fight, silence returned. Kepler stood on the observation deck, watching fragments drift into space. "Send the coordinates of their capital," he said. "It's time to end this." His officers hesitated. "Sir, the Council will call it genocide." Kepler turned slowly. "So be it." As the Terran fleet prepared for the jump to the Xylar homeworld, transmissions began to pour in from across the galaxy. Dozens of smaller species pleaded for protection, swearing loyalty to humanity. They had watched what the humans did to the Xylar, swift, exact, merciless, and they chose to stand beside the victors rather than against them. Earth's influence grew overnight. The once mocked newcomers had become a power no one dared to provoke. But Kepler felt no pride. He only felt the weight of what humanity was becoming. "We started this to save our children," he murmured to Mira. "Now the galaxy fears us. Maybe they should." When the fleet finally entered Xylar space, the stars were filled with burning debris from alien retreat ships. The Dominion's capital planet glowed faintly, its defense grid alive with energy. Kepler raised his hand. "Begin the strike." Thousands of missiles streaked through the atmosphere, tearing through planetary shields like paper. Explosions rippled across the surface, and the once proud spires of the Xylar collapsed into dust. Kepler watched in silence as fire consumed the horizon. He didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He simply whispered, "For the children." In the following hours, the transmission from Earth echoed across every known frequency. "To all species of the galaxy, this war is over. Let the ashes of Xylar remind you of one truth. Humanity forgives much but never forgets. Harm our children, and your worlds will share their fate." And as the message reached the farthest edge of space, stars seemed to dim. The galaxy understood at last that the age of humanity had begun, and the fury of Earth was not just legend. It was the new law of the cosmos. Smoke drifted through the void above the burning remains of the Xylar homeworld. Every major alien broadcast relayed the same haunting image. The capital turned to ash, its once golden towers lying broken beneath black clouds. The sound of human engines echoed faintly through the silence of space. It was not just the end of a war. It was the end of arrogance across the stars. For the first time in galactic history, the mighty Xylar Dominion had fallen, and the conquerors were the very species they once mocked as primitive. Admiral Kepler stood on the bridge of the Vigilant, staring through the wide viewport. Below him, the planet still burned. His crew worked quietly, no one daring to speak. The faces around him showed no joy, only exhaustion and disbelief. Humanity had avenged its children, but victory carried the bitter taste of loss. Thousands of soldiers had died to make this moment real. "Sir," Captain Mira said softly, Council transmission incoming. They're demanding you stand down immediately. Kepler didn't look away from the window. And if I don't? Mira hesitated. They're calling this genocide. Kepler exhaled slowly. It's justice. The screen behind him flickered to life. The Galactic Council appeared. Dozens of alien leaders, their faces filled with fear and accusation. The Xylar elder who had once taunted humanity was gone, replaced by nervous diplomats desperate to regain control. The Council's high speaker leaned forward, voice trembling. Admiral Kepler, you have crossed every law of interstellar conduct. You've annihilated an entire species capital. The galaxy will not tolerate this barbarity. Kepler finally turned to face them. His voice was calm, cold, and unshaken. You tolerated their experiments on human children. You tolerated their slavery in silence. And now you want to talk about morality? The aliens fell silent. The human admiral's gaze cut through them like a blade. Let me be clear, he continued. We do not want war. We never did. But if the Council ever dares to look away again while our people suffer, we will make sure your stars burn next. The high speaker tried to argue, but the transmission cut out before he could speak another word. Kepler turned back toward the window, watching streaks of human landing shuttles descend through the smoke. The operation to recover the last human captives had begun. On the scorched surface below, Terran Marines moved through the ruins of Xylar's once mighty citadel. Blackened statues of alien kings lay shattered on the ground. Every corridor reeked of ozone and death. Among the wreckage, human soldiers found more than what they came for. Inside a vault beneath the capital, they discovered data archives, experiments, recordings, and documents that made even battle-hardened soldiers shiver. The files revealed that Erebus 7 had not been the only colony attacked. The Xylar had been running human trials for years, targeting small, unprotected settlements. They had studied human genetics, endurance, and something they called the rage factor, the mysterious ability of humans to fight harder when pushed beyond reason. One soldier whispered, they wanted to understand how we survive. They should have known we survive everything. When the data reached Kepler, his expression darkened. The truth was worse than he imagined. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about ensuring such horror could never happen again. Prepare the broadcast, he said. The galaxy deserves to see what their council ignored. Hours later, every world, every screen, every ship in the galaxy received the same transmission. Footage of alien scientists experimenting on terrified human children. Council reports marked classified, and the sound of children crying for help. The galaxy froze in shock. Races that had once mocked humanity now looked at their own leaders with suspicion and disgust. Within days, riots erupted across multiple worlds, demanding justice, demanding change. On Earth, people gathered in silence as the images played. Mothers wept. Fathers clenched their fists. Children watched in confusion, too young to understand why the stars could be so cruel. And amid that silence, one truth settled into every heart. Humanity had been right to fight. But for Kepler, there was no peace. In the solitude of his quarters, he watched the footage again and again. The faces of the children haunted him, but so did the destruction he had unleashed. Did we go too far? He asked himself softly. Mira entered quietly behind him. Sir, she said, sometimes justice and vengeance look the same. Kepler looked up at her. And which one are we now? Mira didn't answer. She didn't need to. Outside, the stars were quiet, too quiet. Humanity had won, but the silence felt unnatural. Something had changed across the galaxy. Fear had replaced arrogance. Respect had replaced mockery. But trust? That was gone forever. Weeks later, the council reassembled, this time humbled and fractured. Dozens of races withdrew their support, blaming each other for silence and corruption. No one wanted to challenge humanity again. Instead, they invited Earth to take a permanent seat, an offer meant to keep peace, but really it was an act of fear. Humanity had become the balance of power. Admiral Kepler stood before the new human delegation as Earth's anthem played softly across the chamber. His uniform was still scarred from battle, his eyes hollow but sharp. We accept your invitation, he said. But understand this, we are not here to rule you. We are here to remind you what happens when power forgets compassion. The aliens applauded nervously, but deep down, they knew humanity's rise was irreversible. The age of human diplomacy would be built not on trust, but on memory. The memory of a world called Erebus 7, and the fury that followed. As Kepler walked out of the chamber, a quiet message came through his earpiece. Distress signals from an unknown sector, reports of slavers attacking another human convoy. He stopped walking, his expression turning to steel. "Ready the fleet," he said. "If the galaxy still hasn't learned, we'll teach them again." Outside, the stars shimmered faintly, as if warning every species watching. The humans were still out there, watching, waiting. And if anyone dared to harm their own again, the fury of Earth would return, faster, colder, and deadlier than before. Silence stretched after the last fires died on the Xylar capital. The galaxy changed in ways no one could yet measure. Cities on distant worlds lowered their flags. Markets that once traded in arrogance now spoke in whispers. The Terran fleet returned to orbit, their hulls scarred and quiet. Sailors who had once laughed at old songs now moved with the slow weight of those who had seen too much. Admiral Kepler walked the corridors of Vigilant as if walking through a memory. He had won, he had saved children, and he had helped reshape the galaxy, yet every step felt heavy. He had seen faces of those children, some smiling, some empty, and he could not forget the cost. When he paused to look at Earth from the bridge, the blue planet hung like a small promise in the void. People below were rebuilding. Schools reopened. Mothers held their children tighter. For many on Earth, that sight alone made the war worth it. The rescued children found their way back slowly. Some remembered names, some remembered only fragments. Doctors, teachers, and therapists worked day and night. The children were given new rooms, new stories, and new songs. Soldiers who had carried them home learned new duties, tucking blankets, telling bedtime tales, tying shoelaces. These small acts mattered more than the loud parades ever could. Each child brought home a piece of the future the humans had fought to protect. Across the council halls, the ghosts of old politics shuffled like papers in a storm. The Galactic Council lost credibility. Secret files exposed years of deals and blind eyes. Rulers who had once shrugged at human pleas now called for reform, for new rules, for ways to prevent such horrors again. Many pledges were made, and some were real. New treaties formed, small and fragile, like young shoots after a winter. Other promises were only for show, words to soothe public fear while power quietly returned to its old games. Kepler watched those speeches with a patient face. He knew how easily words could hide true intent. Not all species capitulated to fear. A quiet resistance rose among smaller worlds, people who remembered being bullied by larger empires long before humans rose. They offered ships, ports, and refuge to Earth. These alliances were not born from gratitude alone. They were born from a common understanding. When the strong protect the weak can stand taller. These new friends quietly shifted trade routes, shared intelligence, and began rebuilding communities once preyed upon by empires. Yet even as nations rebuilt and treaties were written, the idea of humanity had shifted into legend. Children on distant moons whispered stories of the black ships that came out of the dark and the handprints that glowed in armor. Poets wrote somber lines about justice and cost. Merchants sold trinkets shaped like small hands. Songs spoke of a species that loved and fought harder than anyone expected. The galaxy had room now for a new myth, one that warned and comforted with the same breath. Back on Earth, a tribunal convened to judge those who had ordered experiments on children. It was not a show trial. Evidence was plain: documents, images, and testimony. Some were punished. Others were exiled. The verdicts did not bring back the lost, but they made sure the story would not be hidden again. Kepler testified not as a victor, but as a witness. His words were simple. "We acted to save what mattered most," he said. "I would do it again." Perfect peace did not follow. Smugglers and slavers, sensing weakness in the chaos, tried to exploit new gaps. Small raids flared at the edges of human influence. Kepler expected this. He ordered patrols, rescue teams, and quiet strikes to cut supply lines. The humans had not become conquerors. They had become guardians with a clear rule: the innocent would be defended. This rule earned them both respect and dread. Allies appreciated protection. Enemies learned fear. Inside the Terran science labs, researchers pored over the data taken from the Xylar archives. Some findings were hopeful: new ways to heal trauma, new energy techniques to power remote worlds. Other discoveries were darker, like weapons ideas best left unused. Kepler set strict orders. Knowledge that could harm would be sealed, shared only with those who pledged care. He knew the thin line between using science to heal and using it to control. Humans had crossed the line before. They would not let it happen again. The children grew. They learned, they played, and sometimes they stared at the stars with quiet questions. Some became engineers, determined to build safer ships. Some became singers, turning pain into songs. A few grew up to serve in the Terran Defense Force, not for glory but to guard the future they had almost lost. Their stories, soft and private, seeded a new culture that valued compassion as much as strength. Years passed and the galaxy settled into a new rhythm. Trade routes changed. Some empires crumbled. Others reformed. The Galactic Council reformed too, with Earth given a seat that was earned in blood and mercy. But power, old and new, always found ways to reshape itself. Kepler understood that history would judge them in decades, not days. He hoped humanity would be judged kindly, but he knew the past did not always bend toward mercy. One evening, Kepler stood alone on a quiet terrace overlooking a rebuilt harbor. Children laughed in the distance, and a warm breeze carried the smell of ocean and wood. He thought of the first message he had sent into space, short, sharp, and clear, and how it had changed everything. A young voice from behind startled him. A child, no more than 12, held a small carved hand and looked up with eyes like the sea. "Will the stars remember us as good?" she asked. Kepler knelt, taking the wooden hand gently. "They will remember what we did," he said. "They will tell it in different ways. Some will call us heroes, some will call us monsters. But what matters is this. When someone tried to take what we love, we did not look away. We fought for the future." She smiled, and in that smile, Kepler found what he had wanted all along, a future that could still be soft. He rose, feeling both the weight and the small, stubborn light of hope. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity, yes, but it had also learned that a species willing to give everything for its children could teach others to care in return. Far beyond the bright harbor, a faint signal blinked on an old listening post. It was small, almost lost in static, but it carried one clear sound, a child's laugh. The signal vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving behind a quiet promise. The future remained, and humanity would guard it, whatever the stars might bring next. Stars still whispered the name of the war long after the fires went out. Every spaceport, every moon colony, every alien court used the same phrase in quiet tones: the fury of Earth. The galaxy, for all its empires and fleets, had seen a new kind of war, one born not of greed but of love twisted into vengeance. On Earth, the aftermath came with strange silence. The cities that had cheered victory now carried a different air, of grief, reflection, and pride all mixed together. Parades were short. Speeches were brief. Humanity had changed, and so had the galaxy's view of them. Children played again under blue skies, but their parents looked to the stars with suspicion rather than wonder. Admiral Kepler knew it was not over. He had seen what no one else had: the data recovered from the Xylar vaults. He alone knew that the experiments weren't isolated. In the far reaches of uncharted space, the data hinted at something older, something directing the Xylar from the shadows. Files spoke of the Arbiters, a secretive species that never appeared before the Council yet influenced entire empires. If they had ordered the capture of human children, then the war humanity just fought had only been the first act. Inside the Terran High Command, the lights were dimmed for another late meeting. "If these Arbiters exist," said Captain Mira, "why not show themselves? Why hide?" Kepler stared at the holographic projection of deep space coordinates, a blank region beyond charted routes. "Because they don't need to show themselves," he said quietly. "They let others do their work. And if the Xylar served them, we've only fought their pawns." Silence filled the room. Everyone understood the implication. The fury of Earth had frightened the galaxy, but what if someone far older had been watching it all? Learning, preparing. Outside shipyards expanded again. This time it wasn't for vengeance but readiness. Humanity's strength had become the balance that kept the Council from collapsing. Yet behind that peace, whispers spread, of unknown ships sighted at the edges of known space, of signals that didn't match any language in the archives. 3 months later, those whispers became real. The outer mining colony of Kepler 9, named after the Admiral himself, vanished without warning. The last transmission was short. Not Xylar, different, darker. Kepler received the report in silence. He stood at the window of his office, the planet below glowing in twilight. "They're testing us again," he murmured. "They want to see if humanity will respond." When the Vigilant left orbit once more, its departure was met with fear and awe. Entire systems watched as the Terran fleet, rebuilt and sharper than ever, disappeared into the void. The galaxy had prayed they would never see those ships again. Now their return meant something worse than war. It meant history was repeating itself. In the darkness beyond the mapped lanes, the fleet traveled through the abyss where no star shone. The crew felt uneasy. Sensors picked up strange readings that made no sense. Space seemed alive, breathing around them. Then, without warning, the lead scout ship vanished from radar. No explosion, no debris, just gone. Moments later, something massive appeared in the distance, a structure larger than a moon made of black metal that reflected no light. It pulsed faintly like a heart. The scans failed. Every system shorted as if the structure itself rejected being seen. "What is that?" Mira whispered. Kepler's voice was low. "That's where they've been hiding." As the fleet moved closer, communication broke down. Strange voices filled the comms, fragments of language and emotion that made no sense but felt hauntingly familiar, as if they spoke directly to the human mind. Some crew members froze mid-task, whispering things they couldn't have known. Kepler ordered all external contact cut. "They're probing us," he said. "Stay focused." When human fighters launched to approach the structure, the truth became clear. The hulls of the alien craft emerging to intercept them bore no symbols, no lights, no sound. Their shapes were shifting, almost alive, like metal fused with shadow. They didn't open fire, they simply collided, absorbing the first Terran wing into themselves. The screams from the pilots didn't fade immediately. They echoed through every comm frequency like trapped voices. "Fire all weapons," Kepler shouted. The Vigilant unleashed its cannons and beams of pure light cut through the dark. The structure trembled, but instead of breaking, it rippled, healing itself. "This isn't war," Mira said in horror. "It's something else. Then we adapt," Kepler answered. For hours, the Terran fleet fought against the impossible. Missiles detonated in silence. Ships vanished in lightless space. But for every vessel lost, the humans pushed forward. They discovered something. Every time their weapons struck the heart of the structure, the psychic interference weakened. Humanity's stubborn resilience became their shield once more. Finally, with one last order, Kepler commanded all ships to channel their reactor cores into a single focused blast. "For every child they took," he said, "for every life they broke, end this." The sky turned white. For a moment, all sound vanished. Then the black structure cracked apart, splitting into dust and shards of shadow that drifted silently through space. When the fleet reappeared days later near the outer colonies, half its ships were gone, but the threat was gone too. The arbiters, if they had truly existed, had vanished without a trace. Back on Earth, Kepler recorded one final log. "We faced something beyond reason and survived. Humanity always does. If they come again, we will rise again. The fury of Earth is not rage, it's love sharpened by loss." He closed the log and looked to the stars one last time. The galaxy would remember the humans as warriors, but those who knew the truth would remember them as something far more dangerous. A people who never stopped caring, no matter how much it cost. And somewhere in that endless dark, new stars began to form. Born from the ashes of a war that taught the universe one lesson it would never forget. Humanity doesn't start fights. But when the innocent cry for help, humanity becomes the storm that answers. The ruins of the Arbiter structure drifted through deep space like a wound that refused to close. Fragments of black metal shimmered faintly in the void, radiating strange energy that made scanners stutter. No one dared approach too close. The Terran fleet marked the area as forbidden, Sector Black, and left it to the silence. Months passed. The galaxy began to believe the war was finally over. Trade resumed. The Council, desperate to rebuild its authority, broadcast endless speeches about peace and unity. The smaller worlds whispered thanks to the humans who had ended the terror, yet the fear remained, thin as mist but present in every corridor and every shadow of the stars. No one could shake the thought that something was still watching. Admiral Kepler returned to Earth to rest. He should have felt proud, but rest felt like exile. The world below had changed since his departure. Cities were brighter, cleaner, rebuilt after years of chaos. People greeted soldiers as heroes, yet the gratitude felt rehearsed. In their eyes lingered something new, unease. They loved their defenders but feared what those defenders had become. Humanity's reputation had turned from curiosity to legend, from legend to warning. Kepler walked through the Terran Memorial Garden, a long path lined with the names of the lost. Thousands etched in black stone. Among them were his own friends, captains, scientists, medics, pilots, the nameless and the known. He stopped at one name and brushed his fingers over it. Captain Mira Lorne. She had stayed behind during the final strike to keep the Vigilant stable when its core overloaded. She had never returned. Kepler's voice broke the silence. We ended the war, Mira. But I'm not sure we ended what started it. Back at the command center, reports arrived again. They came quietly at first. Minor anomalies near the edge of human space. Ships finding faint signals of impossible origin. Pieces of the Arbiter wreckage that seemed to move on their own. Engineers claimed to hear faint voices in static when decoding the data. The scientists wanted to destroy the fragments immediately, but others argued they could hold valuable knowledge. The decision reached the Terran Council: create a containment site in orbit around Mars to study the remains under strict control. They named it Project Echo. Kepler was appointed as the overseer. He agreed, though his instincts screamed otherwise. We don't cage what doesn't die, he said once, but no one listened. The facility rose over months, a floating fortress wrapped in energy shields and research pods. The fragments were brought inside heavy stasis fields glowing with blue light. At first, everything remained stable. The scientists recorded faint pulses like slow heartbeats in the dark. They called it residual resonance. But on the 57th day, one of the smaller shards cracked. No explosion, no light, just a vibration that passed through every wall and bone. Readings are spiking, one technician said. It's broadcasting something. Kepler rushed to the command deck. On the main display, thousands of strange symbols scrolled across the feed. They weren't just data. They were messages, repeating patterns in human phonetics, building toward coherence. Slowly, painfully, the symbols translated into words. We see you. Panic swept the room. Systems flickered. The shard's pulse synchronized with the facility's power core. In seconds, every monitor showed new lines. You survived. That was the test. Now we begin. Kepler slammed his hand on the emergency lockout. Shut it down. Cut all power. But before the order completed, every light died. For 3 endless seconds, only darkness and breathing filled the chamber. Then a single sound echoed through the hall. A soft, rhythmic knocking like something tapping on the outer hull. Engineers ran diagnostics, convinced it was debris. The sensors disagreed. The knocking wasn't external. It was coming from inside the walls. Within hours, chaos spread. Crew members began hearing whispers in their own voices, answering questions they hadn't asked. Data files rewrote themselves. Security footage showed brief flashes of figures, human-shaped, made of light and shadow, walking the corridors. Kepler ordered a full evacuation, but communication with the surface was gone. Every message bounced back with the same corrupted reply. Echo acknowledged. Integration proceeding. He realized then what the Arbiters truly were. Not gods, not demons, but architects. Builders of civilizations. Testers of endurance. They observed species across galaxies, pushing them to the brink to see which would rise and which would vanish. Humanity's fury had fascinated them. Their defeat had not ended the experiment. It had begun the next phase. Kepler gathered the remaining officers in the central chamber. They want to see what happens when fear becomes power, he said. They're not coming to destroy us. They want to merge with us. How do we stop them? One officer asked. We don't, Kepler said quietly. But we can choose what we become. He walked to the control terminal and manually rerouted the power grid. The stasis fields collapsed, flooding the chamber with light. The fragments of the Arbiter core floated upward, swirling like a storm of fireflies. The crew shielded their eyes. Kepler didn't move. You want to see humanity's true form? He whispered. Then see it through us. He activated the Vigilant Protocol, a failsafe built after the war, designed to destroy any technology threatening planetary safety. But this time he changed its parameters. Instead of annihilation, the energy surge was inverted, pulling the Arbiter fragments into the reactor's core and merging their energy with human systems. Light consumed the station. On Mars, observers saw a flare brighter than the sun, then silence. When they sent rescue ships, the station was gone. No wreckage, no radiation, nothing but a faint pulse echoing through space, steady, calm, alive. Months later, deep space explorers reported new signals unlike anything known. They carried human DNA patterns mixed with impossible energy signatures. Kepler's name was found encoded within them. Some say the admiral and his crew became something more, part human, part arbiter, the first hybrid guardians watching from beyond. Others whisper that the experiment continues still, not by them but through humanity itself. On Earth, a child looked up at the night sky one evening and saw a faint blue pulse among the stars, blinking like a heartbeat. She smiled without knowing why. Somewhere far beyond, something ancient smiled back. The universe, once divided by fear and power, now waited for what would come next, for the species that refused extinction and turned its fury into creation. And the stars, remembering the wars and the loss and the love, whispered once more. They were human.